The corridor was never meant to echo. Windsor Castle had stood for centuries as a monument to order, stone laid upon stone in deliberate permanence. Its hallways carried history with composure. Footsteps were measured, voices were lowered. Even grief, within these walls, knew its place. But that evening, something fractured the discipline. A child's cry. It slipped through carved archways and along polished floors, threading itself into the cold air like something alive. Not the brief frustration of a tired heir, not the theatrical protest of a stubborn mood. This was different, raw, breathless, continuous. Princess Charlotte was crying, and she had not stopped. The camera drifts through the length of the north corridor. Oil portraits watch in silence. Chandeliers dim for the hour cast long shadows across crimson runners. Outside, the last light of Berkshire dusk dissolves behind the battlements. Inside, protocol continues as if nothing has changed. But something has. At the far end of the hall, a door opens with restrained urgency. Catherine, Princess of Wales, steps into the corridor. Her composure is intact, as it always is in public life. Yet the pace of her stride betrays a private alarm. She moves quickly but without spectacle. Silk does not rustle loudly. Heels do not strike sharply, even in maternal distress. She understands that walls here have memory. Another echo. Charlotte sobbed, thinner now, exhausted. Catherine does not hesitate. She has learned the rhythms of this castle, learned which doors conceal diplomacy and which conceal fragility. She knows that children raised here must be both cherished and carefully observed. Every expression carries implication. Every lesson is layered with precedent. Yet this is not a lesson. This is pain. As she reaches the small antechamber outside her daughter's sitting room, she finds him waiting, a royal guard. His posture is immaculate. Scarlet ceremonial tunic, gold buttons aligned with mathematical precision, a white belt drawn firm across disciplined stillness. The tall black bearskin hat shadowing eyes that reveal nothing and everything. He does not move first. He waits to be addressed. Catherine slows, steadying her breath. When she speaks, her voice is controlled, quiet. How long? The guard's response is measured. 47 minutes, Your Royal Highness. 47. Not approximate, not emotional, documented. And before that, a fractional pause. There was an encounter in the green drawing room. The corridor grows colder. Catherine does not blink. She does not allow surprise to register. That is a discipline she mastered long ago, the art of hearing something consequential without reacting to it visibly. Who was present? The Queen Consort. The words hang in the air between them. Queen Camilla. There is no accusation in the guard's tone. No suggestion of impropriety. Only fact. Inside the chamber beyond the door, Charlotte's sobs rise again, smaller now but sharper, like glass under pressure. Catherine closes her eyes briefly. This is not merely a family matter. Nothing inside these walls ever is. The monarchy survives on two pillars, continuity and silence. And silence is rarely accidental. She nods once. Who else? 2 footmen on rotation. 1 lady in waiting. All dismissed shortly after. Dismissed by whom? Her Majesty. The title lands heavily. Catherine absorbs the information with stillness that would appear serene to an outsider. But beneath that stillness, calculation begins. Time, witnesses, tone. Protocol dictates that no heir, no matter how young, is corrected harshly in private without a parent present. Guidance, yes. Instruction, certainly. But discipline carries structure. It is not spontaneous. If something deviated from that structure, it is not a small matter. Charlotte's crying shifts, not loud now, but trembling. The sound is worse this way. Catherine places her hand on the brass handle of the door, but before entering, she turns slightly back toward the guard. Did you hear what was said? The guard remains motionless. No, ma'am. The door was closed. A pause. But I heard the tone. The admission is careful, respectful, weighted, and it did not resemble instruction. The camera lingers on Catherine's face. There it is, the invisible line. In monarchies, tone is power. A raised voice is not merely volume. It is hierarchy asserted without negotiation. Catherine opens the door. The room inside is softly lit. Toys arranged with almost ceremonial neatness. A small writing desk near the window. Curtains drawn halfway against the dying light. On the settee sits Princess Charlotte. Shoulders shaking. Cheeks flushed. Eyes bright with confusion more than defiance. Catherine crosses the room in 3 strides. No titles now. No roles. Only mother. She kneels, gathering her daughter into her arms. The sobbing softens but does not cease entirely. Charlotte clutches at her mother's sleeve, as if anchoring herself to certainty. "It's all right," Catherine whispers. "I'm here." The camera pulls back slightly. Behind maternal tenderness lies calculation. "What happened?" she asks gently. Charlotte tries to speak, but cannot immediately. Breath catches. Words collapse into tears. Catherine does not rush her. Outside the chamber, the guard resumes his post. Inside, the heir to a future crown trembles. Finally, in broken rhythm, Charlotte speaks. She said, "I must remember. Who comes first?" Catherine's expression does not change, but her mind sharpens. "And what did you say?" Charlotte hesitates. "I said, Gon told me we must always be brave." Gon. Queen Elizabeth II, the late Queen's private nickname, echoes like a bell struck in a quiet cathedral. Catherine understands immediately. Courage in a child's mouth can sound like defiance in an adult's ear. What happened then? Charlotte's voice drops to a whisper. She said courage must never forget obedience. There it is. Not cruelty, not scandal, but pressure. A recalibration of authority delivered too sharply for 7-year-old shoulders. Catherine smooths her daughter's hair, absorbing each detail without interruption. She does not criticize. She does not confirm suspicion. She listens, because within this institution, listening is leverage. Minutes pass. Charlotte's breathing steadies gradually. Tears subside into exhaustion. Catherine rises slowly, guiding her daughter toward the adjoining bedroom. A nurse steps in quietly to assist. No words exchanged beyond necessity. Once Charlotte sleeps, Catherine returns to the sitting room. The fire has burned lower. The castle hum outside remains unchanged, staff moving, silver being polished, schedules being drafted for tomorrow's engagements. Normalcy is a powerful disguise. She stands at the window, overlooking the quadrangle. Guards shift positions below in ceremonial precision. What happened tonight may never appear in newspapers. It may never be spoken of in official briefings, but its consequences could ripple quietly for years. Because heirs remember tone, and children who grow inside palaces do not forget the first moment they feel small. A soft knock interrupts her thoughts. The guard again. "Your Royal Highness," he says quietly. The incident log requires classification. There it is, the machinery of monarchy. Every deviation recorded, every anomaly categorized. Catherine turns from a window. How has it been entered? A private audience. No irregularities noted. Of course. Silence maintained. She studies him carefully. And unofficially, the guard does not move, but something shifts behind discipline. There was distress inconsistent with routine correction. A measured statement, carefully worded, honest. Catherine steps closer. In your judgment? A beat of hesitation, not from doubt, but from awareness of weight. It crossed into severity. The word lands, not shouted, not embellished. Severity. Catherine inhales slowly. The cost of silence reveals itself now. To challenge a senior royal informally risks internal fracture. To ignore it risks something deeper, erosion. Motherhood and monarchy rarely collide publicly, but when they do, the collision leaves marks no one sees. She nods once. Thank you. The guard inclines his head. As he turns to leave, Catherine speaks again. I will require you at midnight. A fractional pause. Yes, ma'am. Discreetly. Always. The corridor absorbs the conversation as if it never occurred. Hours later, Windsor sleeps. Or appears to. Midnight drapes the castle in silvered quiet. Torches flicker along ancient stone. The clock tower marks the hour with restrained authority. Inside a small private study rarely used for formal counsel, Catherine waits. A single lamp glows against dark wood panels. Files rest neatly arranged on the desk. Not accusations, information. The guard enters precisely at 12. No ceremony now, only duty. Catherine gestures toward the chair opposite her. This does not leave this room, she begins. Understood. She studies the security ledger he places before her. One entry. And signed. A gap in documentation. During precise minutes, Charlotte was alone in the green drawing room. Small, almost invisible. But in institutions built on order, small fractures matter. Who is responsible for this notation? She asks. The duty equerry, ma'am. And why unsigned? The guard's answer is quiet. Uncertain. The word echoes louder than any accusation. Catherine closes the ledger gently. This was not merely emotional. It brushed against protocol. And protocol, once disturbed, has consequences. She rises slowly. Outside, the wind moves across the castle grounds, rustling trees that have witnessed centuries of rains. Whatever occurred tonight, she says softly, was not simply correction. The guard does not respond. He does not need to. Catherine steps toward the door. Tomorrow, she continues, we proceed carefully. The lamp flickers slightly as she extinguishes it. Darkness fills the study, but not uncertainty. As she walks back to the corridor of silence, the castle feels altered, not broken, but aware. And for the first time that evening, Catherine understands something with absolute clarity. This is no longer about tears. It is about boundaries. And boundaries within a monarchy are never trivial. The castle slept, but Catherine did not. The corridors were silent now, yet every echo from the previous night's cries lingered, invisible but insistent. In her private study, she spread out the minutiae of the day, the schedules, the footmen rotations, the official engagements under Buckingham Palace authority. Each piece of parchment, each notation, became a clue in a puzzle that demanded precision. This was no longer the realm of maternal instinct alone. It had become a matter of protocol, of institutional integrity. The camera drifts over ledger entries, each line etched in careful script, each hour accounted for. Candlelight flickers across the pages, revealing the delicate balance of power within these walls. Guard shifts, private audiences, tea times with visiting dignitaries. Every movement choreographed, every gesture deliberate. Yet amidst a meticulous order, one detail, small, almost imperceptible, gnawed at her attention. An entry and signed. During the precise moment Charlotte had been in the green drawing room. The royal guard who had accompanied her the previous night returned promptly. Ceremonial composure replaced by the quiet candor of duty. He laid a second set of records before her. These, he said, are the logs of daily incidents. Protocol dictates that any deviation from standard practice, however minor, is documented. For heirs, particularly, these logs ensure emotional and physical safety. Catherine absorbed the words with the precision of someone trained to weigh both fact and implication. And the child, she asked, voice even, almost clinical. Protected by centuries of convention, the guard replied. Young royals' emotional stability is paramount. Corrective guidance is logged, witnessed, and classified. The aim is preservation of both person and institution. She leaned forward, scanning names, dates, notations. Archival references, some over a century old, reminded her the depth of this tradition. Queen Elizabeth II had codified procedures ensuring that heirs were shielded from harsh correction, that the tone of instruction never bordered on intimidation. Small deviations were not overlooked. They were studied, contextualized, and contained. Yet tonight, she realized something unscripted had occurred. She motioned toward the ledger. These notes, they suggest that the green drawing room event was routine? The guard's brow furrowed imperceptibly beneath the bearskin hat. Officially, yes, but inconsistencies exist. Footmen accounts differ on timing. Lady-in-waiting testimony contradicts the sequence of dismissal. Subtle but significant. The camera pans slowly across the polished oak desk. Each document is precise, yet the anomalies are clear. Protocol is designed to eliminate ambiguity. Here, ambiguity persisted. Catherine's mind reconstructs the scene. Charlotte entering, Camilla issuing instruction, Charlotte resisting, not defiantly, but instinctively. Courage, inherited from her late great-grandmother, manifested in the eyes of a 7-year-old. The guard's account hinted at tone unbefitting the age of the child. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to disrupt equilibrium. Hours passed in quiet deliberation. Footnotes and protocol manuals revealed centuries of carefully archived incidents. Notes from the era of Queen Elizabeth II described how young heirs would be guided, firm yet gentle. Instruction tempered by reassurance, emotional response monitored and recorded. Deviations were anomalies, worthy of concern. Catherine's eyes traced another page. A minor alteration in the daily security log. One unsigned entry glimmered like a beacon. No name, no signature, just a blank where accountability should reside. The duty equerry, she asked. Yes, Your Royal Highness. Uncertain why unsigned. The silence in the study was profound. Outside, the castle walls absorbed the wind. The guards on night patrol were statues in scarlet, disciplined shadows crossing battlements under moonlight. Inside, Catherine considered the implications. In an institution built on hierarchy, even minor lapses carry weight. She turned to the guard. What could justify this omission? He paused. Only speculation. Perhaps uncertainty. Perhaps oversight. Perhaps something more deliberate. The last possibility hung heavy in the room. Catherine's thoughts drifted back to Charlotte. Tears, trembling, courage, obedience. Each element now had a corresponding record, each observation documented by protocol. Yet the unsigned entry suggested a fracture in that record, a moment not fully accounted for. Minutes became hours. Catherine reconstructed the timeline. Who entered the green drawing room, when each footman rotated, which engagements were scheduled, how the palace staff moved with choreographed precision. She cross-referenced witness statements against formal logs, aligning each movement with the clock tower's silent markers. Small inconsistencies began to surface. A footman claimed to have been elsewhere. The lady-in-waiting's timing did not match the official rotation. Archival precedent suggested these were insignificant, human error, until the tone and duration of Charlotte's distress were factored in. Catherine leaned back, considering the moral dimension. Duty demanded adherence to protocol, but compassion demanded scrutiny of what protocol might have missed. A child's emotional welfare, particularly in heirs, was not negotiable. Within the monarchy, emotional oversight is a silent responsibility, codified yet invisible. She scribbled notes, drawing lines between entries, highlighting gaps, noting discrepancies. A pattern emerged. The breach, though subtle, had authority behind it. Someone had exercised power without documentation, without oversight. The implications were clear. This is no longer about minor deviation, she murmured, almost to herself. It is about unrecorded influence. The guard nodded. And influence without accountability can unsettle even the most disciplined household. Catherine moved to the window. The quadrangle stretched beneath the moon, guards in disciplined motion, the castle's ancient stones unyielding. Tradition demanded silence, yet truth required acknowledgement. Who else has access to these logs? She asked, tone precise. The senior equerry and the palace secretary. Beyond them, entries are confidential. Then this unsigned entry, Catherine's hand hovered above the ledger. It is our first undeniable red flag. The guard's stance did not waver. He had trained for centuries of protocol, yet even he recognized the significance. Indeed, ma'am, protocol exists to prevent ambiguity. Ambiguity is the first breach of the code. Catherine closed the ledger gently. The fire in the hearth had burned low, casting a warm glow over polished wood and gold-framed portraits. The castle remained asleep, yet within her mind, the gears of scrutiny were relentless. She considered the consequences. To escalate now meant confronting hierarchy, challenging unspoken power. Yet to ignore it risked the erosion of both Charlotte's emotional safety and the sanctity of palace procedure. Catherine rose slowly, moving through quiet corridors toward her daughter's chambers. Every step measured, every breath deliberate. The guard followed silently, unseen yet present, embodying centuries of ceremonial duty. At Charlotte's door, she paused. The child slept, exhausted but unharmed. Catherine allowed herself a moment to observe. The steady rise and fall of small shoulders, the faint whisper of breathing, the innocence of trust undisturbed. This was what must be protected. And yet, the unsigned entry remained, a ghost of the night's tension, a mark of authority exercised without witness. Catherine returned to her study, eyes fixed on the ledger once more. She would not confront this lightly. Every step would be deliberate, every record consulted, every implication considered, because in Windsor, protocol is not mere procedure. It is a vessel through which power, discipline, and legacy are preserved. And tonight, the vessel had shown a small crack. The castle seemed unshakable in the morning light. Yet inside, tension coiled like a living thing. Catherine moved through the quiet halls of Windsor, the echo of her own heels muted against the crimson runners. The corridors were immaculate, disciplined, ceremonial, yet every step felt heavy, burdened with implication. The events of the previous night, the unsigned entry in the green drawing room log, and Charlotte's trembling courage had revealed a fracture beneath the surface, something that protocol could neither erase nor ignore. She entered the small office used for confidential counsel, the desk strewn with ledgers, witness statements, and historical records. The royal guard waited, ceremonial posture softened by a rare gravity. The meticulous order of the room, polished wood, precisely stacked documents, silver inkwell gleaming, contrasted with the storm of questions Catherine now carried. "Let's review again," she said. Step by step. Who was in the green drawing room? The guard recited with precision. The queen consort, the duty equerry, the 2 footmen, the lady in waiting. Charlotte had been present, of course, and yet, within the structured sequence of events, the unsigned entry remained, a gap of accountability during the precise moment that mattered. Catherine's mind worked like a finely tuned instrument. She reconstructed the scenario. Charlotte entering the room with innocence and curiosity, Camilla issuing a private correction, the tone, sharp, perhaps unintentionally severe, landing upon a child's understanding. Courage, inherited from Queen Elizabeth II, had surfaced in Charlotte's defiance, her whispered insistence on bravery, and that defiance had caused ripples. Catherine leaned back, contemplating the moral way of authority. In Windsor, hierarchy was absolute. Instructions flowed downward with certainty. Yet, when discretion faltered, when tone overstepped its intended bounds, even the highest authority trembled under the consequences. She moved through the palace to the administrative offices, where the senior equerry and palace secretary maintained control over schedules, logs, and confidential correspondence. Their eyes, trained for diplomacy and discretion, flickered briefly as she presented the unsigned entry. "This is no longer minor," Catherine said. "This is an unaccounted moment of authority exercised without oversight. It concerns the heir directly." A silence followed, heavy, almost oppressive. The palace functioned on a balance of order and discretion. Challenging a senior figure was unthinkable, and yet necessary. The staff shifted, uncertain, aware that loyalties were being tested. Some glanced toward tradition, others toward conscience. The royal guard spoke softly, almost reverently. "Your Royal Highness, the Crown's code is unbroken when all adhere to procedure. When discretion is bypassed, the institution's stability is at risk, even in subtle ways." Catherine nodded. She understood. The Crown is a living entity, sustained by adherence to rules that often go unseen. And yet, it is fragile in the hands of human discretion. Later that morning, she met with select staff in the private council room. Footmen, ladies in waiting, and the equerry each gave accounts. Most were measured, cautious, careful not to implicate anyone overtly. Yet the pattern was unmistakable. Inconsistencies, subtle contradictions, gaps in recollection. She pressed, not for blame, but clarity. "I need the exact words, the tone, the intent." Charlotte's courage, invoked through memories of her late great-grandmother, emerged as a pivotal detail. Some staff recalled the child referencing Queen Elizabeth II's principles: bravery, integrity, honor. Others recalled Charlotte's attempts to assert these quietly in response to Camilla's correction. It was minor in words, monumental in implication. Catherine recognized the tension building. Staff began to choose sides, not publicly, but in the private calculation of loyalty. allegiance to protocol or allegiance to conscience, to the crown or to the child. Even within the most disciplined household, fractures formed where ethical questions overrode routine. The camera lingers on Catherine's hand resting lightly on a ledger, the ink from historical records reflecting the morning light. She considered the implications. Escalating formally could challenge hierarchy. Ignoring it risked emotional harm. Both were dangerous. Both required precision. A soft knock interrupted the gathering. Another royal guard, trained in discretion, delivered a sealed note. Catherine opened it carefully. Inside, a report confidential, referencing past instances when heirs have been privately corrected, carefully documented, usually gentle and always witnessed. Yet the tone described in Charlotte's account did not match precedent. Here, protocol faltered. Authority had been exercised without its stabilizing witness. A tremor passed through the palace's invisible hierarchy. Catherine's mind raced. What had begun as a small emotional disruption now revealed itself as a systemic concern. The lessons of centuries, courage, guidance, protection, were now tangled with human oversight and the subtle assertion of influence. She returned to her daughter's chambers briefly, observing Charlotte at play with quiet concentration. The child's small hands, arranging toys with methodical care, mirrored the palace's own rituals. Precise, deliberate, layered with meaning. Yet beneath the surface, the child's earlier experience lingered, a subtle mark left by authority untempered by care. Later that afternoon, Catherine convened a private conversation with the palace secretary. The discussion was formal, restrained, almost ritualized. Every word measured, every implication considered. She pressed the question of escalation, how to address authority exercised beyond protocol without causing public disruption. The secretary's reply was measured. Formal channels exist, but they carry risk. Hierarchy is absolute, yet conscience, your royal highness, has its own weight. And there it was, the moral pivot. Even the most disciplined institution could not ignore conscience entirely. By evening, Catherine had pieced together the truth. Charlotte's tears were not mere childish distress. They were the first visible manifestation of authority misapplied, subtle but significant. The ensigned entry was no longer a minor clerical error. It was a signal. The crown, even at its highest levels, could tremble when discipline and empathy diverged. She stood at the window, looking over the quadrangle as the last light of day faded. Guards moved in precise arcs, shadows sharp against ancient stone. The palace seemed unchanged to the outside world. Inside, however, loyalties had shifted. Tensions were palpable, and the first threads of a confrontation were forming. Catherine understood the choice before her. Escalate formally and challenge hierarchy, or manage privately and preserve discretion. Both carried consequences. Both required courage. In that quiet moment, she reflected on her daughter's whispered invocation of Gongon's words. Courage, she realized, is a subtle force, small, almost invisible, yet capable of unsettling even the most rigid structures. And tonight, that courage would demand a decision. The castle had grown quieter, but the echoes of the previous confrontations lingered, heavy and unspoken. In her private chambers overlooking the palace grounds, Catherine sat alone, the soft glow of a single lamp casting long shadows across the room. Outside, the quadrangle stretched under a sky thick with twilight clouds. The ordered rhythm of the castle, guards in red tunics, polished floors, whispered instructions, continued unbroken, as though nothing had happened. Yet inside, the balance of tradition and morality pressed upon her with tangible weight. Catherine spread the documents before her. Confidential memoranda, internal advisories, and archival notes detailed incidents of heirs corrected, guided, or cautioned over generations. One sealed advisory from decades past caught her attention. It referenced lessons from the era of Princess Diana, a reminder how emotional wounds could ripple across time. These were not merely stories. They were precedent. The camera moved slowly over pages. Handwritten notes, meticulous logs, and faded ink, each one a testament to centuries of discipline and careful management of heirs' emotional development. The walls themselves seemed to lean in, listening, observing, holding every secret. Catherine's mind traced patterns, searching for clarity. Her thoughts drifted to Charlotte, 7, resilient, yet undeniably impressionable. The child's courage, her invocation of Gongon's words about bravery, now took on greater significance. Courage was a compass, yes, but a fragile one. In a palace built on stoicism, even subtle missteps could become defining moments. The guard's testimony from the previous night was clear. Charlotte's tears were not about discipline itself, but about feeling diminished, misunderstood. The tone of correction, unrecorded, untempered, had left a mark. Catherine could almost hear the faint echoes of sobs in the chamber, still vibrating in memory. She recalled every detail. The softness of Charlotte's voice, the hesitant words, the way the child sought to anchor herself to principles of bravery. A 7-year-old invoking the legacy of a late monarch. It was remarkable, and it was a statement. Authority, when exercised without care, had consequences even in the most disciplined households. Catherine reviewed the ledgers again. Each entry, each record of palace procedure, reflected a centuries-old philosophy. Emotional stability for heirs was paramount. Yet here was the anomaly, and signed unverified, a ghost in the archives. Its presence magnified the impact of the night's events, revealing that rules alone could not guarantee the protection of a child's psyche. Hours passed. Catherine's reflection became meditation. She considered what it meant to raise a future working royal inside a structure that prized control over vulnerability. The stakes were high. Every word, every gesture, every moment of oversight could influence the trajectory of a life destined for public scrutiny and historical consequence. The camera drifts past the window, over the gardens where shadows of ancient trees stretched like sentinels. Catherine's thoughts, too, stretch across time, imagining her daughter as both child and future monarch. The weight of inheritance, both emotional and institutional, was no abstract concept here. It was palpable, pressing against her chest. She revisited the advisories from Diana's era. Emotional wounds, when left unacknowledged, had a way of echoing for generations. The lesson was clear. Vulnerability must be safeguarded as diligently as protocol. Discipline without empathy could fracture, imperceptibly yet permanently. Charlotte's tears were a signal, a quiet alarm that tradition had failed to anticipate. The guard's observations reinforced this truth. His disciplined, measured recounting of the previous night highlighted what records alone could not convey: the subtle dissonance between authority and compassion. Tone, not rule, had caused a fracture. Authority, when untempered by care, could destabilize even the most orderly environment. Catherine rose, moving toward the balcony. The castle grounds lay in perfect symmetry, bathed in the muted glow of lanterns. Each figure below, guard, attendant, servant, performed duties with mechanical precision, unaware of the moral calculations unfolding above. And yet, the echoes of Charlotte's courage, her subtle insistence on bravery and fairness, lingered in the spaces between polished stones and ceremonial uniforms. The reflection deepened. To protect a future monarch was to navigate an intricate web of legacy, emotion, and power. To fail was to risk not only the child's sense of self, but the integrity of centuries-old tradition. Every precedent, every protocol, every carefully worded memorandum now converged into a singular responsibility: ensuring that Charlotte's dignity remained intact without fracturing the delicate machinery of the monarchy. Catherine considered the next steps. This knowledge, painful, intimate, and instructive, required careful action. Escalation was possible, but public confrontation would be catastrophic. Discretion, precision, and empathy were paramount. The goal was clear: restore order without sacrificing the child's sense of worth, maintain authority without subjugating innocence. The lamp flickered. Shadows danced along the ornate woodwork. Catherine's eyes rested on the closed door of Charlotte's chambers. Within that room lay more than toys or furniture. It held the unspoken weight of lessons learned too early, courage recognized too quietly, and authority challenged in ways that would shape a life. Finally, she returned to the desk. Pens poised, ledgers open, memoranda reviewed. Every detail mattered. Timelines, witness statements, historical precedent. The castle around her continued its quiet rhythm, but within her mind, every step of what occurred, every subtle inflection and gesture, was being catalogued. This was preparation. preparation for a private, decisive conversation that could not be undone. As she closed the last of the documents, Catherine exhaled slowly. Clarity had emerged from reflection. Charlotte's distress was not an incident to be dismissed. It was a marker, a signpost that the machinery of inheritance must be tempered with humanity. Authority must be measured. Courage must be nurtured, and the quiet dignity of the heir must be preserved above all else. Outside, the castle remained stoic, seemingly indifferent to the intricate moral calculus unfolding within. But inside, the weight of inheritance pressed heavily, a burden to be borne not just by the child, but by those entrusted with her protection. The sitting room was quiet, but it held the weight of centuries. Catherine entered deliberately, each step measured, heels muted against the polished wood. Heavy drapes filtered the late afternoon sun, casting long, warm shadows over the ornate furniture. The room was formal yet intimate, a place where conversation could be both ceremonial and consequential. Every detail mattered. The alignment of chairs, the placing of silver inkwells, the subtle gleam of portraits staring silently from gilded frames. This was not just a room. It was a stage for diplomacy, discipline, and moral assertion. Across from her, seated with unspoken authority, was Camilla, queen consort. The posture was perfect, the composure unyielding, the ceremonial role of a sovereign's partner fully embodied. Yet Catherine did not come to challenge the monarchy itself. She came to uphold the line that could not be crossed, the line between authority and fear, between guidance and intimidation. She began softly, deliberately. "Camilla, I wish to speak privately regarding an incident involving Charlotte. It is not my desire to undermine your authority, but to clarify principles regarding the guidance of heirs." Camilla's gaze was steady. "Of course, Catherine. Please proceed." Catherine's eyes did not waver. Children who are heirs to the crown must be guided, certainly. But guidance must not cross into intimidation. Emotional security is not a matter of personal preference. It is a matter of state continuity. The lessons they receive in youth form the foundation of future judgment, temperament, and courage. Camilla listened, poised, but her expression revealed nothing. Catherine continued, maintaining the slow, deliberate cadence of someone accustomed to both diplomacy and moral conviction. "The events of last evening," she said, "left Charlotte distressed, not in rebellion, but in a way that suggests the tone of correction was heavier than protocol allows for her age. This is not accusation, nor is a reflection on intent. It is observation and duty." The room remained suspended in formal tension. Outside, the castle walls absorbed sunlight and shadow, indifferent to human emotion. Inside, every word was laden with consequence. Catherine allowed silence to hang, letting the weight of her statement settle. Then, carefully, she outlined the principle. Heirs must be guided, not intimidated. Every gesture of authority carries moral weight. Every correction, if misapplied, risks imprinting fear rather than understanding. This was not negotiation. It was instruction rooted in the centuries of precedent that safeguarded both child and institution. Camilla shifted slightly, acknowledging the gravity. Her reply was measured, diplomatic, yet receptive. "I understand your concern, Catherine. The intention was to instruct, not to distress. It seems, however, that the impact was unintended." Catherine inclined her head subtly, recognizing both acknowledgement and restraint. Intent alone is insufficient. Outcomes matter. Charlotte must feel secure, even under correction. The crown endures because authority is tempered with restraint. Without it, guidance risks becoming coercion. The camera lingers on Catherine's hands, resting lightly on the arm of the chair, calm yet resolute. Each word spoken in measured rhythm, each phrase carrying the weight of moral certainty. This was a delicate dance of confrontation within the palace. Firm yet respectful, authoritative yet compassionate. Camilla remained composed, and the subtle acknowledgement of her responsibility signaled that the line had been understood. No argument, no public spectacle, only the quiet, unmistakable assertion of principle. The authority of motherhood, tempered by duty, had drawn a boundary that would not be crossed again. Catherine allowed a moment of reflection, scanning the sitting room. The intricate tapestries, the polished wood, the portraits of monarchs past who had navigated similar tensions. Each symbol underscored the subtle power of restraint. By upholding the dignity of her daughter, she also preserved the dignity of the institution. She rose slowly, signaling that the conversation had concluded without confrontation, but with clarity. The room had absorbed the tension and released it into understanding. Authority, once misapplied, had been corrected, not through escalation, but through the quiet assertion of principle. In the corridors outside, order continued. Guards marched with disciplined precision. Servants moved without disruption. The machinery of monarchy remained intact. Yet beneath the surface, subtle adjustments had been made. Loyalties were respected, dignity preserved, and Charlotte, unaware of the precise mechanics, had her sense of security restored. Catherine lingered briefly by the window, looking out over the quadrangle. The evening light painted long shadows across the castle grounds, and in those shadows, the quiet moral victory of the day was evident. The lessons of courage, dignity, and emotional security had been reaffirmed. Protocol was respected, authority was clarified, and a child's trust, once strained, was safeguarded. As she departed, Catherine understood that moments like these, invisible to the public eye, yet monumental in their effect, were threads that bound the monarchy across generations. Every act of measured guidance, every boundary drawn with care, ensured that the crown endured not through fear, but through respect, dignity, and moral clarity. The night settled over Windsor Castle like a velvet shroud, soft yet absolute. Inside, the corridors were empty, polished floors reflecting the faint glow of lanterns. Outside, the gardens lay silent, shadows stretching long under the moonlight. In this quiet, the castle seemed less a building and more a repository of generations. Each stone, each portrait, each polished surface a witness to the unspoken acts that sustained the monarchy. Catherine walked slowly through the hallways, her footsteps muted against the runners. She paused at the doorway to Charlotte's chambers. The child slept soundly, small shoulders rising and falling in measured rhythm, unburdened now by the weight of lessons that had been imparted with care. A soft smile touched Catherine's lips. Courage, resilience, and trust had been preserved quietly, invisibly. Outside, a royal guard continued his silent vigil. Standing in disciplined stillness, he seemed part of the walls themselves. His presence was an echo of centuries of loyalty, quiet, unobtrusive, yet unwavering. No proclamation was needed. His duty was a silent affirmation that the institution endured. Catherine reflected on the events of recent days. Authority had been tested, boundaries had been asserted, and the emotional well-being of an heir had been safeguarded without scandal. Every action, though discreet, had carried immense consequence. In the tapestry of monarchy, the smallest gestures, a measured word, a withheld reprimand, a private acknowledgement, could shape not only a life but the continuity of an entire institution. The camera drifts across the castle interiors. The tapestries, the portraits, the long corridors, all witnesses to acts of restraint and courage that history rarely records. The true strength of the crown, Catherine realized, lay not in jewels or ceremony, but in these quiet moments. A mother's vigilance, a guard's disciplined loyalty, a child's innate courage. Each formed a living legacy. Catherine paused in the private study, reviewing the sealed memoranda and ledgers once more. Each document told a story of guidance and restraint, of protocol intertwined with humanity. She traced a finger along the inked lines, imagining the generations who had acted with the same silent intention, preserving dignity, protecting innocence, ensuring continuity. The lesson was clear. Power, when tempered with compassion, becomes enduring. Authority, exercised with restraint, builds trust. Courage, nurtured quietly, blossoms in ways visible and invisible. These were the whispers that sustained a monarchy, far beyond the glare of public spectacle. From her window, Catherine watched the castle grounds bathed in silvered moonlight. The quadrangle was empty, yet every shadow, every stone, held memory. She imagined Charlotte growing, learning, understanding. A young royal whose experiences had been shaped not by fear, but by measured guidance. A child whose courage had been recognized, whose dignity had been safeguarded. The royal guard shadow moved along the corridor, precise and unwavering. His silence was not absence. It was protection. In the stillness, Catherine understood the quiet truth of legacy. It is built not through dominance, but through vigilance, empathy, and subtle courage. She returned to Charlotte's room briefly, watching the child sleep. There, in that unguarded innocence, was the culmination of all unseen acts of protection. A crown passed not through ceremony, but through whispers of restraint, compassion, and steadfast loyalty. The night deepened. Windsor Castle, timeless and resolute, seemed to exhale. History continued its quiet rhythm, and Catherine, standing alone in the glow of lantern light, understood that this was the real inheritance of monarchy, the delicate, unseen balance of authority, courage, and compassion.